Good morning, traders. I'm Emily Bonney, the CEO of the Investment Banking Institute and your host here at NewsWare's Trade Talk. Joining me is trading anchor Bill Olson, who brings more than 30 years of institutional trading experience to our program. At Trade Talk, we provide the facts, themes, and trading ideas for the day ahead. Today is Friday, October 10th. We are coming off a down day on Wall Street as investors continue to monitor the latest batch of corporate earnings and the ongoing government shutdown. To close out Thursday, trading markets retreated from their record highs. The Dow sank 243 points, the Nasdaq shed 18, and the S&P 500 also gave up 18 points. Bill, let's get into Friday's action with what is happening in the markets this morning.
Hi, yes, good morning, Emily. I'm watching the S&Ps. The SPUs are trading higher. We're up 0.13%. That's a nice little move. We were up the 0.04 for most of the day, and now we've doubled that. We've almost tripled it. I mean, we're up 0.13. So I do like to see that. And one of the key developing stories that I saw this morning was a news report that came out that said the BLS is recalling some workers to help produce next week's inflation report. This is kind of a key story for the markets, because if those inflation reports don't come out next week, it's very clear that the markets would weaken. Everybody knows it, and I've been kind of expecting it. And with this little nugget of news that they're recalling them to make sure that this report comes out, that's a big benefit for the markets, and that is likely to help stem the selling pressure for next week if they do come out with that report. So yeah, that's very positive. But however, overall the government shutdown remains in effect, and there's no progress to note. I mean, but this BLS story is hot. But because they're taking care of the economic reports. What I foresee is the negotiations, the shutdown of the government is going to last longer than anticipated. What else do we have? We had trade talks with U.S. and China. They're rising. The tensions are rising. China introduced fees on U.S. ships docking at Chinese ports, and there's more to it as well. I mean, Trump's talking about not allowing Chinese airliners that are flying over the U.S. Flying over Russia to land at U.S. airports. That's a negative. And then so there's a lot going on, and of course the news announcement I mentioned yesterday about the rare earths. So yeah, those tensions are elevated. But what you got to remember is, Trump and Xi, the presidents of China and the U.S., they're going to meet later this month at that summit in South Korea. So a lot of these negative actions, they will likely be scrubbed, and we'll see some positive action. And with the market not falling off on these things, that's a good sign. Qualcomm, that's another story out of China, because China's allegedly they're probing Qualcomm on monopoly allegations. But overall, hey, Middle East tensions, they're subsiding. Israel and Hamas, that peace proposal appears to be holding. That's good news. What did I see on the corporate side? Elastic, ESTC, they're displaying positive action this morning. Remember, they had their Analyst Day yesterday, and the company raised their outlook and more. This morning, we're seeing APLD applied. APLD is up more than 20%. I think it's up more than 30% after releasing earnings last night. APLD was a big winner. And Fastenal, ticker FAST, they're going to be announcing Monday morning. That's one to watch. Looking overseas at the action, what's happening over in Europe. And we're seeing some mixed action. It's relatively minor. They're ebbing higher, but I can't say they're higher. They're pretty much flat on the day. You look at the DAX. The DAX is down 13 points, 0.05%. There are some concerns about rising AI valuations. We know that. The FTSE turned. It was lower. Now it's turned higher by 0.02%. There's some weakness in mining and energy stocks. That's to be expected. But the CAC, the CAC is outperforming. Seeing outperformance in the bank sector. President Macron is expected to announce a new prime minister as early as today. So you would think they would see more of an uptick, but no, they're up 0.03%. So, but that still is positive. Looking last night at Asia. Asia was mostly in the red. I mean, the fact that the Nikkei dropped 491 points, that's a little over 1%. Remember, it had that 1.74% gain yesterday. But there's heightened political coalition risk in Japan. Sentiment is closely tied to the incoming prime minister's ability to rebuild parliament, and seems to be having some issues there, and that's why you saw a little weakness in the Nikkei. Keep an eye on the yen, the Japanese yen, because that's a real key for equities that was flat overnight. Hong Kong, the Hang Seng dropped 462 points, or 1.73%, with weakness in financials and tech. China, the Shanghai, dropped 0.94%. 94%. I mean, and that's due to the escalation of the trade tensions between the U.S. and China. So as long as they're increasing, you're going to see a little bit of concern in the market. So these two countries need one another for economic growth. Then we're turning our attention over to oil. And what do we see in oil? Oil is falling, down over 1.3%. You get WTI at $60.66 a barrel. That's down 1.38%. You got Brent at $64.33. That's down 1.36%. Why is oil falling? Hey, it's the simmering tensions in the Middle East. That peace is holding, and that's positive. We did get a surplus in the EIA inventory report on Wednesday. That is also, helping to dampen oil prices. I don't know if this big loss this morning of more than 1% was really able to hold, because Russia launched a big drone attack and missile attack early this morning, targeting Ukraine's energy infrastructure. The U.S. Treasury has imposed sweeping sanctions targeting over 50 individuals and entities and vessels involving the facility of Iranian oil flow. So, this is the sort of thing that would actually boost oil prices because there being less, out there, less oil out there. But right now we're seeing weakness, and it's really due to the ceasefire in Gaza. But that's what I have for you in terms of a morning market update, Emily.
Bill, of all the things I could point out in that update that we're going to dive into more, one of those areas is earnings action. You mentioned APLD, Applied Digital. They released earnings yesterday. The stock is up pretty big this morning. That happens to have been your pick of the day yesterday. So let's start there. Bill, what is going on in terms of earnings action?
Yeah, let's talk about APLD, Applied Digital. I mean, they beat by 13 cents. It was a great report. It really was. And you want to know something? They did it on higher revenue. And you look at the stock this morning, APLD is up big. It's up, over 25%. Then you have Levi Strauss, ticker LEVI. They beat by 3 cents, but they only met on revenue. It wasn't a bad report, but that stock is trading lower by 6.85%. And then you have, Monday mornings, we have Fastenal, ticker FAST. They're going to be releasing their EPS is 30 cents. Expect to move is 5.62% when they release on Monday morning, Emily.
Bill, we might already be able to call APLD a win, but stick with us through the end of the show for a full check-in on that pick of the day from yesterday. Now we're going to move on to the day's economic events. Bill, you mentioned that, with the ongoing government shutdown, they are looking to still try to release some of these key reports from the Department of Labor Statistics. So that's sort of this big overview of what is sort of happening on that front, and really the economic front. This government shutdown has been forefront over the last, now we're at 10 days. So Bill, let's do a rundown of what's going on in terms of the day's economic events.
Well, in terms of the economic events, at 10 a.m. you get the University of Michigan Consumer Sentiment Report. It's okay. It's not it's not a major report in my opinion. And then at 1 p.m. you get the Baker Hughes rig count. You're going to be hearing from some Fed speakers today. At 9:45 a.m. you're going to hear from Chicago Fed Bank President Austin Goolsbee, and then at 1 p.m. you're going to hear from St. Louis Fed Bank President Alberto Mossam. Yesterday, Fed Governor Michael Barr was giving a speech at the Economics Club in Minnesota. He expressed significant concerns about inflation and urged caution on further rate cuts following the Fed's, 25%, 25 basis point cut in September. I mean, he's emphasizing that inflation risks remain high. He cited that the Fed's median projection that inflation may not return to the 2% level, 2% target until late 2027. So he's saying to his Fed members, you got to be cautious on, additional rate cuts. And you want to know something? Who else was there? Neil Kashkari. He's one of the brightest guys on the FOMC committee. And he's out there and he's saying, I agree with your comments. He agreed with him. So, Yeah, inflation. And then with the BLS coming out and saying that they're going to be bringing back the furloughed workers so they can get out that inflation report, that is just heightening the expectations of that report when it comes out next week. So yeah, we've got a lot of interesting economic stuff going on today.
Bill, you're following that economic stuff using your NewsWare. Those Fed comments become increasingly important as we navigate what's going to be happening next with monetary policy and combining that with, watching inflation and hopefully getting some reports coming out in the near future. You're watching, again, all of that using your NewsWare. As earnings actions picking up, you're watching those reports using your NewsWare. And you can still create other customized types of alerts. You break down your NewsWare alerts into things like merger news, guidance news, shareholders meetings, buyback news, and catalyst calls. You're able to watch your stocks group together like your FANG stocks and your Dow 30 stocks. So, Bill, what else do you see is possibly moving the markets on this Friday?
Doing a quick data check. I'm looking at my Dow stocks. I got 8 lower. I got 3 unchanged and 19 higher. That's a positive action. But then you got to look at the S&P stocks. You got to specifically look at the FANG stocks because they're the most heavily weighted in the S&Ps, and that will really be the driver. And they're mixed. I mean, some gains in Tesla and Meta and Google, but some losses in Apple and Amazon. So it's mixed, which is why we're seeing a slight rise in the S&P. Could be more. We'll have to wait and see how everything turns out when the market opens at 9:30 this morning. But if you're looking at the news behind the tape this morning, like Apple, they're coming. There's a lot of talk about Apple's first foldable phone. Now, foldable phones have been around forever, but Apple's never done this. But they are working on one, and it features the titanium aluminum hybrid frame. So it's kind of interesting. Meta, Instagram is exploring a dedicated TV app and a video push. Hmm. Tesla, hey, the September China-made EV sales rose 2.8% year over year. That's good news for Tesla. Finally, a little good news coming out. In terms of Dow Jones 30 stocks, we're talking Disney, DIS. They're opting out of allowing their intellectual property to appear in an OpenAI Sora app. Probably a wise move. And then you got to talk NVIDIA. I mean, for a second, Singapore police probe a NVIDIA customer Megaspeed over alleged China export violations. That's not good for those guys. In terms of merger news, Salesforce.com, ticker CRM, they agreed to buy software company AppPromore. In terms of guidance news, USNA, they're forecasting softer than expected sales. Yeah, that stock's getting hit this morning. In terms of buyback news, Lockheed Martin, LMT, they announced a 2 billion share repurchasing program. And ESTC, Elvis, Sam, Tom, Charlie, Elastic, they announced a 500 million stock buyback plan. That's positive. That's what I have for you about news in the tape this morning, Emily.
This is the type of data that NewsWare delivers daily. It's factual, it's market moving, and our alerting functions bring it to your attention as it happens. Go to www.newsware.com now and sign up for the trial and see for yourself the benefits that professional Newswire delivers. It is now that time of the show for the Trade Talk pick of the day. Bill, what do you have for us to close out this week?
Going with FAST, FAST, that's Fastenal. The earnings are out Monday morning. The EPS is 30 cents. The expected move is 5.57%. Okay, let's look at yesterday's call volume for a second. 2,129 calls versus 872 puts. That's more than 2 to 1. That's a good sign. Then you get the open interest, 56,493 versus 42,754. Again, positive. Now the major brokers, they do like it, but they got minor price targets really kind of where the stock is valued at. So I'm a little concerned about that. I'd like to see them have price targets well above the stock, but they do like it. They're semi-positive on it, so that's good. But I want to get in. My optimal entry price is 46.70, but I got to get in under 47. It's got to be under 47, and so I'm going to split the difference between 46.70 and 47 and say 46.85 is an entry point. So my pick for the day is FAST, Fastenal, Frank Apple, Sam Tom, with an entry price of 46.80. Emily.
Another earnings play today, Bill, and looking at that target entry price, it's also a key piece of information. Certainly you can make a call, but then adding that extra layer so we can really watch for some weakness to get in the right price to optimize our gain. We will follow Fastenal along with you today. And in just a moment, we will do that recap on yesterday's pick of the day, as I promised. But before we get there, let's take a look at the current breaking headlines that have hit the tape in our hot off the press segment. Bill, sending it back to you.
Okay, CRISPR, CRSP, Charlie, Richard, Sam, Paul, they're presenting new preclinical data from Centas gene editing platform. Rocket Lab, RKLB, signs a contract for 2 Electron launches with JAXA. Six Flags, ticker FUN, Frank Uncle Nancy, their chairman's going to depart. MOS, Michael Oscar Sam, stock's down like 13% after reporting preliminary Q3 segment volumes. Scott Bessent says he's got the list down to 5 for the next Fed chairman. LMT, I told you about the 2 billion share buyback, but they also raised their quarterly dividend 5%. Wow. Target, they reached a deal with a bunch of banks for up to $1 billion in a revolving credit line. Wendy's, ticker WN, they're developing a new data-driven ad campaign to better connect with their customers. That's interesting. Where's the beef? China has intensified enforcement of import restrictions on U.S. chips, including NVIDIA's AI processors. Britain designated Google with their strategic market status because it has deployed new powers to tackle dominance of big tech and paving the way for interventions if deemed necessary. That's all I have for you this morning.
Okay, Bill, before we dive into Friday trading, let's do that check-in. On yesterday's pick of the day, we probably already given it away, but you did pick Applied Digital, as you mentioned. They did report earnings yesterday, and they beat on higher revenue, that strong revenue beat. They tied it to AI data center demand. The revenue was $144.2 million. That was up 6% year over year. The company also highlighted a new lease deal with CoreWeave, and Needham raised its price target to $41 on the stock this morning. It is up nearly 28%. Bill, how did your call work out?
It worked out great. That's all you can say. Applied Digital, APLD. The stock opened up yesterday at $28.18 and fell down to $27.07. Now, I was saying $27.60 is an entry price, but it did show more weakness than that. But the market was, kind of off yesterday. So it doesn't surprise me. But you know what? This one climbed back. It climbed back all the way to 29.29. So you made your 1% during the day yesterday. So goal was reached because we're only looking for 1% every day. But, if you held on to it because you want to think because you knew there was going to be a big move after earnings, you cleaned up because look at the stock today. The APLD is trading 37.35 and is up 27.52%. That's huge. It's a big winner. You don't get many of these, 25% winners every day, but we got one. Last night. So yeah, APLD winner, Emily.
And Bill, I'm happy to take a 1%, but even happier to take nearly 28%. And like you said, they don't happen every day, but you have a way of calling them. So that is certainly a win. And we will check in with you on Monday about today's Fastenal pick of the day. Bill, thank you as always for your expert insight. Join us back here Monday and each weekday morning next week at NewsWare's Trade Talk when we provide the facts, themes, and trading ideas for the day ahead. Again, I'm your host, Emily Bonnie, here with trading anchor Bill Olson. Traders, you know what to do. Let's go out there and make some green.